This is the second part from the anime. On the other hand, Raster continued to beat up the exam participants until it was Rick's turn to step forward. At the same time, one of the spectators named Adolf had the ability to see someone's statistics just by looking at them. At that moment, Adolf explained that everyone has 4 basic statistics: physical strength, agility, control, and mana energy source. When Adolf looked at Raster, he realized that Raster's mana energy source was very large, even though his other statistics seemed ordinary. But when Adolf looked at Rick, he was shocked as Rick's 3 statistics, namely physical strength, agility, and control, were off the charts, while his mana energy source was 0. On the other hand, Elisa got acquainted with Rionette and the other members of the Orichalcum party. Elisa was quite surprised, as Rick had strong companions. However, Elisa was worried about Rick, knowing that Raster liked to torture the exam participants. Unexpectedly, Brufston explained that Raster would not be able to torture Rick, because the training he went through with him was far more torturous. Finally, the test began with Raster attacking Rick with a variety of strikes. However, Rick merely withstood the attacks, finding them easy to block. Additionally, Raster, having plenty of mana, launched a barrage of attacks, but Rick was still able to hold them off, following Rionette's earlier advice to understand Raster's attacks. During the exam, Rick asked Raster about his goal of becoming an adventurer, where Raster admitted that he had talent and the prestige of a noble. Rick said that he trained harder than Raster, and his strength was already at S rank. However, Raster laughed at Rick's confidence, saying that Rick was just lucky to avoid all his attacks so far. Raster then summoned a wood monster as his ultimate attack, but Rick remained calm and used a basic wind spell on his fist. They both attacked each other, until Rick ultimately defeated the wood monster, shocking the audience because Rick was able to defeat Raster using only a basic attack spell. After that, Rick approached his seniors and received their congratulations. Shortly after, Raster came and was reluctant to acknowledge his defeat. But Rick advised Raster to focus on mastering one's strength. Not long after, it was time for the announcement of the E-ranking graduation, and Rick looked calm while waiting. At that moment, Rick recalled his childhood, when he loved reading books about Yamato, the legendary figure. In those books, it was explained that if someone could defeat a monster named Kaiser, they could ask for anything they wanted. From that point on, Rick desperately wanted to become an adventurer like Yamato. However, his parents did not believe in or support his desire to become an adventurer. They also suggested that Rick find a normal job and get a steady salary. Even so, Rick did not give up, as he consulted with magic experts to see if there was any magic energy within him. According to the magic experts who examined Rick, there was magic energy, but it had not yet manifested, and it was just a matter of time. Rick was very happy to hear this and planned to show his parents that he was worthy of becoming an adventurer. Unfortunately, after a year, Rick's powers still had not appeared. As the result, his friends suggested that Rick register as an adventurer anyway, since there were many people without powers who still joined, and the salary was quite good. However, Rick did not see adventuring as just a job for the salary, as he wanted to achieve his dream of defeating Kaiser. As time went by, Rick grew older, and his powers still had not manifested. After graduating from school, Rick finally got a job as a guild receptionist, which made both of his parents very happy because Rick had secured a good job. Even though Rick started working as a guild receptionist, he did not give up on his desire to become an adventurer. While working, Rick continued to test his abilities, hoping that his hidden powers would emerge. Unfortunately, those powers still had not appeared by the time Rick turned 30. At that time, Rick began to feel that it might be time to give up on his dream since he had become a supervisor at his job after working there for a long time. Additionally, he now had Elisa as his subordinate. One day, Elisa mentioned that recently many monsters had been entering the city, so Rick should be careful. On his way home from work, Rick saw his mother and father getting older, making him start to forget his dream. The next day, an adventurer named Zaid, who was Rick's friend and used to play with him, arrived. It turned out that Zaid came to tell Rick that he had reached B rank, which made Rick both surprised and envious seeing his friend achieve B rank while he was still a receptionist. Although Rick congratulated Zaid, he chose to get drunk after work because he felt frustrated seeing himself fall behind compared to Zaid. After that, Rick also went to the park to daydream. In reality, since working as a receptionist, Rick had never complained because his income was stable. However, Rick started to wonder if he should give up on his dream. Shortly afterward, a commotion, which had become frequent in the city, erupted. Rick immediately approached the source of the noise and discovered a monster called a troll. Coincidentally, a woman was passing by, and Rick intended to protect her, only to realize it was Rionette. However, Rick felt scared because he had no power, but Rionette easily defeated the troll. From this, Rick realized that Rionette was a high-ranking adventurer and thanked her. When Rick tried to guess Rionette's rank, he mistakenly guessed that she was A, B, or a rank. After being told that Rionette was already S rank, Rick felt shocked because S rank meant Rionette was no longer monitored by the local guild, but directly by the central guild. Knowing this, Rick asked Rionette about his dream that he had wanted to be an adventurer and defeat Kaiser since he was a child. Rionette then spoke realistically and noted that Rick was brave when facing the monster earlier, which was an essential quality for becoming an adventurer. However, she said that an adventurer needs to have magic energy trained since childhood, and Rick was already too old, making it difficult for him to become an adventurer. Hearing Rionette's words, Rick felt relieved and thought he might be able to forget his dream. At the same time, Rick accidentally invited Rionette to dinner as a way of saying thank you, and strangely, she accepted the invitation. The next day, Rick was very excited to work because he would be having dinner with Rionette. However, that evening, as they were about to meet, a monster suddenly appeared. When Rick went to the riverbank, he saw Rionette just finishing a fight with a troll. At that moment, Rionette had no trouble dealing with it because of her experience, but soon another enemy appeared, causing Rionette to display her full abilities. After everything was settled, Rionette felt something that reminded her of her past, when a dragon destroyed her village and family. Shortly after, Rionette suddenly felt weak as she sensed the presence of a dragon and couldn't use her powers. While Zaid and his friends came to help, the guild then gave an urgent mission because the city was increasingly infested with monsters. After all the nearby enemies were defeated, Rionette told Rick to stay away because the situation was dangerous. However, Rick was not worried because Zaid and his friends, who were there, were already B rank. But Rionette said there was a dragon nearby. Unfortunately, Rick and the others did not believe her, until the dragon finally appeared before them. With B rank, they were not supposed to fight the dragon and should have left the area. However, one person panicked and accidentally attacked the dragon, causing it to become enraged. Zaid felt they should leave, but the dragon had already put up a barrier, preventing them from escaping. At that moment, Rick tried to sacrifice himself, but Zaid questioned what a receptionist like him could do. Hearing this, Rick explained that if he died fighting the dragon, he could become an adventurer, even if it meant he would still die. Rick also felt that his heart ablaze and threw a stone at the dragon. Seeing Rick's bravery, Zaid and the others became inspired and attacked together. Unfortunately, their efforts still failed, and they were counterattacked by the dragon. Luckily, Zaid used his iron magic, so the damage they took wasn't severe. Unfortunately, they were still no match for the dragon. On the other hand, Rionette should have been able to use her powers, but she was still trapped by the trauma of the dragon. In that critical moment, Rick unexpectedly rose up and refused to give up so easily. When the dragon attacked, Rick managed to withstand the assault with his hidden power, which began to emerge. As the result, a great energy enveloped Rick's body, allowing him to turn the tide and bring the dragon down. At that moment, they couldn't believe Rick, but he soon collapsed and fainted. When he woke up, Rick was already in the hospital, with Rionette constantly by his side. Rionette then said that Rick had been unconscious for a week. After that, Rionette told Rick that she wanted to invite him to join the Orichalcum party as they shared the same goal of defeating Kaiser. Additionally, after seeing Rick's abilities, Rionette believed that he could become an adventurer. Rick was moved by this, as it was the first time someone had said such a thing to him. At the age of 30, Rick still had hope of becoming an adventurer. Back to the present, Rick finally succeeded in becoming an adventurer and rose to level E. Rick was very happy because his childhood dream had finally come true at the age of 32. The next day, Ling was seen in the forest and was very surprised to find that Rick lived in such a remote area. It turned out that Ling planned to meet Rick at his place after the graduation announcement the previous day, and they agreed to hold a party to celebrate Rick's graduation. Additionally, Ling was curious about Rick's party, so he asked to be invited to their residence. When Ling made this request, Rick's face immediately showed panic, and he told Ling to wear full armor if he wanted to visit. Not long after, Ling finally arrived at the address Rick had written down. However, he was shocked because the place looked like the Demon King's castle. Ling began to sweat nervously until he saw a small door and quickly rang the bell. Shortly after, Rick opened the door and the place turned out to be very different from its exterior appearance because the atmosphere inside was very luxurious and not frightening at all. Additionally, Ling was confused as to why he was told to wear full armor if there were no monsters inside. However, Rick mentioned that even though there were no monsters, the people here were scarier than monsters. As soon as they entered, they were greeted by Rionette and Elissaret, who immediately welcomed Ling with a powerful magic attack. Fortunately, Rick quickly deflected the attack, making Ling feel somewhat safe despite the walls around him being slightly damaged. It turned out Elissaret did that because she hadn't practiced with Rick in a long time. Therefore, Rick asked Ling for permission to spar with Elissaret while Rionette escorted Ling to his room. In the room, Ling saw a vast view and then noticed Mizet, who was busy cleaning weapons. Ling approached him, so Mizet immediately showcased his weapons and asked him to try them out. However, Ling became very frightened when trying a weapon that resembled a bazooka, thinking that if this weapon were mass-produced, the world would be in great danger. After chatting with Mizet, Ling finally went back into the house and met Brufston, who was studying. Ling was very impressed with Brufston's book collection and learned that he was the person who first trained Rick. Knowing this, Ling immediately asked to be trained by Brufston, hoping he could become as strong as Rick. Seeing the determination in Ling's eyes, Brufston was intrigued and agreed to train him. Sometime later, Rick found out that Ling was being trained by Brufston, and he was very surprised. Rick then reminded Ling not to be reckless, as training with Brufston would surely be very tough. In the end, Ling truly experienced this, as he was given leg weights and had to walk from a cliff. Finally, Ling fell and resigned himself to thinking he was going to die. Fortunately, Ling landed on the soft body of a beast, which turned out to be a giant wild boar. Realizing this, Ling became terrified as the boar was about to attack him. Unexpectedly, the boar was the dinner hunted by Rionette, so Ling immediately thanked Rionette for saving him. Seeing his condition, Rionette could already guess that Ling was being trained by Brufston. However, Ling felt very fortunate after hearing her stories about seeing Rick in much worse conditions. In short, Rionette served delicious tea to Ling and Rick, until Ling suddenly became curious and asked about the relationship between Rick and Rionette, but they admitted that they didn't have a special relationship. Unexpectedly, Rick actually had feelings for Rionette, so Ling gave him some advice about their relationship. That night, Ling tried to help Rick win Rionette's heart by suggesting he compliment her delicious cooking. However, Rick was oblivious and instead told Ling to eat more. Unexpectedly, Rick's friends also ate a lot, leaving Ling surprised at their huge appetites. After that, Ling suggested that Rick help Rionette, and while they talked, Ling also realized that Rick's innate skill could activate depending on the situation. But even without his skill, Rick was already on par with S rank, and if he could activate his skill, he could be stronger than all of them. At the same time, Brufston informed Ling about 6 magical gems that appear once every 200 years. With these 6 gems, they could open the gate to the place where Kaiser, the legendary monster, sleeps. Intrigued by this, Ling agreed to gather more information about the gems. The next day, a female adventurer named Ray seemed surprised when she saw Rick's party because the members were unusual. Ray wondered why a human like Rick could be friends with a vampire and an orc. Rick and his party apparently wanted to carry out a mission, but the mission required them to have 4 members, so the guild leader then asked Ray to join Rick's party. Ray, who had always wanted to join a party and carry out missions, immediately agreed to join Rick's party and felt confident that she was tough enough to defeat the monsters out there. Eventually, Ray joined Rick's group to continue their mission. At that moment, Rick warned her that they were searching for a magical stone nearby, which could attract monsters and pose a danger to Ray. Despite this, Ray remained arrogant and claimed she was not afraid of monsters. But when they entered the monster's lair, Ray became terrified, forcing Rick to carry her away from danger. With the help of Rick and the Orichalcum party, Ray managed to handle the situation, and she finally understood how dangerous it was to be part of their group. The following days, Ray could only daydream at the guild, which surprised the guild leader, who knew that Ray was still alive after the mission with the Orichalcum party the previous day, even though her mental state was now shaken. Meanwhile, Ray finally learned that Rick and his team were an S-rank adventure party. Although Ray felt late in discovering this, she became even more motivated to become S-rank as well. On the other hand, Rick and his team had now acquired the first stone, and from this stone, they could track the others. Additionally, with Mizet's magic, they discovered that the next stone was in the city of Herakutopia, a country famous for its Colosseum and martial arts tournaments. And the story continues. This is the end from the second part of the anime. Moral lesson from the story: even if you're bad at magic, you might still punch your way to success. But remember, never judge a house by its creepy exterior. It might just be full of friends who are scarier than monsters.